All right, football fans, welcome to another week of shows here at the Call Sheet Daily Podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Smith, here at the Fans First Sports Network. We are into, well, I guess mid-June now. NFL training camps will kick off this week, or their mini camps, I should say, not their training camps. And mini camp is really the last opportunity now for guys to really sort of perfect some of the little things, football in shorts, get the playbook down, the terminology down, familiarize themselves with new teammates, new coaches, etc. Because after minicamp ends, then the NFL takes a break for a little bit. And when they return in July, it'll be training camp and real football. So we are getting close. We're getting close. There's always plenty to talk about, though. I talked about the Aaron Rodgers signing to the Steelers on Friday's show, my hot route conversation with Pez from Pez's Picks. Well, this will be an Aaron Rodgers free zone, at least for the next couple of days. When we get to Thursday, we're going to do our State of the Franchise show, and we will profile the Pittsburgh Steelers this week. But today, I think it's an interesting topic. Unfortunate news late last week with the passing of Minnesota Vikings legend Jim Marshall. And I'm going to remember Jim Marshall on the show today, but I'm going to remember him as part of a broader conversation about athletes who get misremembered or often identified by the one significant mistake that they make in their careers. Because as a non-Minnesota Vikings fan, I grew up with only one image of Jim Marshall that was lasting. And that image was of him scooping up a fumble in a 1964 game against the San Francisco 49ers and returning it 66 yards the wrong way for what was ultimately a safety that earned San Francisco 2 points. So whereas Jim Marshall believed he was scooping up a fumble and running it in for a touchdown, he actually ran it the wrong way into his own end zone and cost his team 2 points in a game against the San Francisco 49ers. And because NFL Films was so important to my generation, we didn't have the internet where you could call up virtually any play at any moment and watch it. We didn't have YouTube. We didn't have social media, etc. NFL Films was really the historian of football, and they captured these images of great games, great moments, great players, etc. And they put them into these cool compilation videos that would get played on ESPN. And if you were like me and a football junkie, you hung on to this stuff. You had John Facenda's great voice narrating. You had, this dramatic orchestral music playing behind it. And I watched Jim Marshall's Wrong Way Run 100 times. And for me, that's who Jim Marshall was. He was the guy that scooped up the fumble and ran it the wrong way. And I didn't really have any broader context as to who Jim Marshall may have been. But as I got older and I became more astute about football history, I became much more tuned into how we should be remembering Jim Marshall. Jim Marshall, for those who don't know, had a 20-year NFL career as a defensive lineman. I mean, it's not totally uncommon to see quarterbacks play 20 years. But for defensive linemen, that is almost unheard of. He owns the NFL record for most consecutive games played, for most consecutive starts. He's tied the NFL record for career fumble recoveries. He was part of a legendary defensive front for the Minnesota Vikings, known as the Purple People Eaters. Jim Marshall, Alan Page, Carl Eller, Gary Larson. They led or were the heart and soul of a Vikings team that went to 4 Super Bowls in the 1970s. It was a dominant team, and Jim Marshall was one of the most dominant players, certainly the most consistent player. Listening to Dave Stefano's excellent podcast, his Two Old Bloggers podcast that he does over on First and Skol, he described Jim Marshall as a man's man. which I think is a phenomenal compliment for any individual, really, certainly for a football player to aspire to. And listening to that podcast, Dave talked a lot about how the consistency, he was always there. He was just a mainstay. If you were a Vikings fan and you're a Generation Xer like myself, the name Jim Marshall was synonymous with the greatness of those Vikings teams in the 1970s. But if you were not a Vikings fan, you probably remember him like I did when I was younger. This guy who made this silly mistake and then got captured by NFL films making that mistake, and then forever that became his legacy. And I was thinking, that's unfair. I mean, it's very unfair and it's inaccurate. But there are others who are remembered that way. Jim Marshall's not the only one. And I thought to myself, who are some of the most misremembered athletes in American sporting history? Some names that came to mind. A fellow football player and a contemporary in the game of Jim Marshall's was Jackie Smith. Jackie Smith, who is in the Hall of Fame, by the way. Jackie Smith is a Hall of Fame tight end who played 21 seasons in the league for the then St. Louis Cardinals and the Dallas Cowboys. I mentioned he's in the Hall of Fame because Jim Marshall also owns maybe the ignominious title of being perhaps the greatest player in NFL history not to be in the Hall of Fame. And listening to Dave Stefano talk, that to Vikings fans is an outrage. That a man who holds the NFL record for consecutive games, consecutive starts, is tied for the NFL record in fumble recoveries, was a mainstay on 4 Super Bowl teams. That guy's not in the league after a 20-year NFL career, that he is not in the Hall of Fame is mind-boggling to them, understandably. Jackie Smith is in the Hall of Fame. 21 years in the NFL. When he retired, he was the all-time leading pass catcher at the tight end position. He made 5 straight Pro Bowls from 1966 to 1970. 2 decades, the 60s and 70s, even into the early 1980s. In 1967, he had 1,295 receiving yards as a tight end. Those numbers are impressive for tight ends today, much less 50 years ago. I mean, think about that. He was really a pioneer at the tight end position. A lot of people look at Kellen Winslow Sr. and say Kellen Winslow really changed the tight end position because he was your first flex tight end who could stretch the field, who you could detach from a formation. Well, before Kellen Winslow Sr., there was Jackie Smith. But for many fans, the one thing they will remember about Jackie Smith is that in Super Bowl 13, in the third quarter of a tight game with the Pittsburgh Steelers leading the Dallas Cowboys 21-14, and the Cowboys facing 3rd and goal from the Pittsburgh 5-yard line and an opportunity to tie the game. Quarterback Roger Staubach dropped back to pass and threw a pass to a wide open Jackie Smith in the end zone, and Jackie Smith dropped it. And Dallas had to settle for a field goal, and that made it 21-17. And Pittsburgh proceeded to go down the field and score twice in the third and early fourth quarters to open up a 35-17 lead. And though Dallas came back, it wasn't enough. And the Steelers won Super Bowl 13, 35-31. And Jackie Smith was vilified for that drop. I mean, never mind that it wasn't a great throw by Roger Staubach. It was low and a little bit behind him. Was it catchable? Yes. Was it a perfect throw that hit him between the numbers? No. And that Jackie Smith slipped while trying to plant and stop his momentum so that he could sort of redirect to catch that pass, so that as the ball arrived, he was falling to the ground. It wasn't as simple a catch as many people make it out to be. When the game ended, when that Super Bowl ended, Jackie Smith, to his credit, stood at his locker for 45 minutes in the aftermath and answered questions about dropping that pass. He didn't duck out of the locker room. He didn't blow off reporters. He was accountable. In the aftermath, he got death threats. He had people phone his house. He had a stalker, a guy who had bet a lot of money on the game, blame Jackie Smith for losing and for him losing that money. Nearly ruined the man's life. He's a Hall of Fame football player with a credible claim to being a pioneer at the tight end position. And yet he's misremembered for one play, one gaffe on a ball that Roger Staubach admittedly said he has thought about hundreds of times over and over again because he could have made a better throw. If we go outside the football world, we've got figures like this, Jackie Smith, Jim Marshall-esque figures. The name Bill Buckner jumps to mind. Bill Buckner, who played 22 years in the major leagues, amassed over 2,700 hits, was a multiple all-star, was a batting champ. A guy who, while he's not in the Hall of Fame, his name is in that conversation, a la Jim Marshall, as one of the best players ever to not make it to the Hall. And yet, if I bring up the name Bill Buckner, and again, you are a Generation Xer like myself, you know exactly what image comes to mind. And that image is Game 6, 1986 World Series, Boston Red Sox. At that time, a seemingly cursed franchise that had not won a World Series since 1918. You're now talking about 60 plus years of futility. And the Red Sox, leading 3-2, have a 6-4 lead as you go to the ninth inning with an opportunity to nail it down. There are 2 outs. There are no runners on base. The Red Sox are 1 out away with a 2-run lead, and the base is empty from winning their first World Series in 68 years. And they give up a hit, and they give up another hit, and they give up a third hit, and now it's a 6-5 game. I think I take that back. I think it was actually 6-6 when Mookie Wilson comes to the plate and hits a slow roller to first base, where first baseman Bill Buckner hobbles over. He's not moving very well. He's got multiple injuries. He's later on in his career at this point, but it's still a relatively easy play. He should simply bend down, scoop it up, step on first base, and the game will go to extra innings. But the ball takes kind of a bad hop, and it hops over Buckner's glove between his legs. Mookie Wilson is safe at first, and the winning run, catcher Gary Carter, who is on second base, circles around and scores. The Mets, the New York Mets, win 7-6 and go on to win Game 7 and claim the 86 World Series. And Bill Buckner, a la Jackie Smith, becomes forever a subject of derision, the target of threats, a name synonymous with choking. And that is such an unfortunate way to be remembered for a guy who had such a stellar career. The careers of Bill Buckner and Jackie Smith, phenomenal careers. And yet both of them get labeled as chokers. Here's another one, Greg Norman. Greg Norman, who, when he retired from the PGA Tour, held the record for the most weeks at number 1 overall in the world. This is a Hall of Fame golfer, a legendary golfer, 331 weeks at number 1, which was a record that has only been eclipsed by Tiger Woods. He is now second all time for the most weeks at number 1 in the world in the sport of golf. He won 20 PGA tournaments. He won multiple majors. But Greg Norman is synonymous in the golfing world with choking. Because at the 1986 Masters, a tournament he never won, he entered leading by 6 strokes, entered the final day, the final Sunday, leading by 6 strokes at the Masters. And he held that 6-stroke lead as he headed to the ninth hole. But he made bogey on the ninth hole. And over the next 5 holes, he made 4 bogeys and a double bogey. He played the next 5 holes at 6 over, and he gave back every stroke of that lead, and he wound up losing by 5 strokes after a disastrous back 9. And his playing partner, Nick Faldo, seized the momentum and ran away with the tournament. A 5-hole stretch over the course of a 20-some year career that saw Greg Norman hold the number 1 ranking in the world for 331 weeks. But a 5-hole stretch on the back 9 at the Masters that undid his legacy and cemented him as a choker in the minds of so many individuals, so many fans. I'll give you one more athlete, Roberto Duran. Roberto Duran, one of the toughest boxers in boxing history, whose heyday in the 1970s came at a time when boxing was one of the most popular sports in America. It was probably baseball, football, and boxing as the most popular sports in America in the 1970s. Roberto Duran, in that heyday, where some of the biggest names in the history of the sport were fighting. Ali, Frazier, Foreman, Sugar Ray Leonard, right? These are names that the Spinks brothers, these are names that people will remember as icons of the sport. And amongst all of them, Tommy Hearns, Marvelous Marvin Hagler, etc. Roberto Duran was named by Ring Magazine as pound for pound the greatest boxer of the 1970s. He won world championships at 4 different weight classes. His nickname was Hands of Stone, which if you're a wide receiver, that's a horrible nickname. But if you're a boxer, that's a phenomenal nickname. Roberto Duran, one of the most fearsome fighters and fearsome individuals in the history of the sport, is remembered as a quitter. Because in November of 1980, in a rematch against Sugar Ray Leonard, a boxer he had defeated just months before in their original bout, he himself, Sugar Ray Leonard, a legendary name in the sport, an Olympic gold medalist, a multiple champion, etc. Roberto Duran quits after the 8th round, famously issues the 2 words, no mas, no mas. If you are like myself and grew up in my era, you've said no mas hundreds of times, jokingly in reference to not wanting to do a thing anymore. No mas, Roberto Duran said, refused to get off the stool for the 9th round. And Sugar Ray Leonard won. And Roberto Duran, one of the toughest, most fearsome fighters in boxing history, is forever remembered as a quitter. And what he told his trainers was, I don't want to fight this clown anymore. Because what Sugar Ray Leonard had done was that he had realized that when they fought in their original fight months earlier in Montreal, Leonard tried to stand in the middle of the ring and fight Roberto Duran. And Roberto Duran just kicked his ass. Roberto Duran beat him up. And so Sugar Ray Leonard devised a strategy where he would dance around the ring. He was a nimble fighter whose movement allowed him to flourish. He'd dance around the ring. He would pepper Duran with a quick flurry of punches, and then he would dance away. And then he would mock and mimic Duran. He'd stick his chin out at him. He'd bolo punch him. He'd shuffle his feet in Muhammad Ali fashion and then float away. He basically would come in, some quick punches, earn a point, a couple of points here or there, and then shuffle away, dance around the ring and mock Duran. And Duran got tired of chasing him, and Duran got frustrated that Leonard wouldn't fight him in the middle of the ring like a man. And he said, I'm not fighting this clown anymore. And he walked away. But he will forever be remembered as a quitter because of it. It's incredible how one moment can define these unbelievably successful careers. And we live in that right now. We live in that moment where the snapshot, right? The viral image, the soundbite can become the definition of a thing, even if that paints a completely incomplete picture of whatever that thing might be. And that's just the reality. So rest in peace, Jim Marshall. I hope he gets into the Hall of Fame. And for some of these other individuals, I hope that time will grant us a better understanding of who they were, as opposed to just the snapshot of their greatest failure. Okay, that's all for me today. Hope everybody has a great Monday. Join me for the rest of the week. Great shows. Whiteboard Wednesday is our Wednesday feature. State of the Franchise will be on the Steelers this week. Pez will be back on Friday for our hot route. Really enjoying our format here. Hope you'll enjoy it with us as well. Until then, take care, everybody.